What if most of what's eating into your mixing time right now just doesn't matter yet? You're putting the hours in, but something still sounds off. And the deeper you go into plugins and processing, the more stuck you feel. In this video, I'm going to show you 5 things beginners obsess over that make the least difference right now, including one popular processing technique that looks essential but will actually make your mix worse if your tracks aren't balanced properly. I'll also show you exactly where your energy should be going instead. Let's start with the one beginners reach for first, the plugin. You listen back to your mix and something's missing. It's not badly balanced, but it's flat somehow. No depth and no dimension. None of that 3-dimensional quality you hear on your favourite records. So you go looking for what's causing it, and the easiest answer is that it's a plugin, some tool you've seen the professionals use that you don't have. Think about a professional photographer. Give a beginner the exact same camera body and the exact lens and put them both in front of the same scene. The professional's photo has depth and life to it. The beginner's looks a bit drab. It's the same camera, it's just a completely different result. And the camera was never creating that depth. The eye behind it was. Deciding what to frame, what light to use, and what to leave out. The camera can only capture a decision that's already been made. So before you add or buy anything new, just stop and listen to what's actually happening in the mix. Is the balance right? Is the arrangement giving each part its own space, or is it just too busy? Those are the things creating the greatest depth, not the processing on top of them. Work with the faders and the pan pots to see how close you can get using only what's built into your DAW. Use EQ and a simple delay. You might not get all the way there, and that's fine. Getting closer with what you've got is still a win. It's still progress, and progress is what gets mixers finished without spending another penny on a plugin you might use once and forget about. And the same energy drain shows up in a different way, one that's got nothing to do with spending money at all. Every morning I make a V60 coffee. I only make one a day, so I try to get it right. I look at the grind, the water temperature, the pour timing, but occasionally the timing's slightly off or I rush the bloom. And you know what I do? I drink it anyway, because it's still a perfectly good cup of coffee. It's just slightly different from yesterday's. The order you apply plugins in is the same. Someone will tell you EQ must come before compression. That's just how it's done. Or that you'll ruin the mix by getting it wrong. And when you're starting out, that kind of confident misinformation is terrifying because it implies there's a correct answer that everyone else already knows about and you don't. Well, there isn't one. Putting a compressor before an EQ doesn't break anything, it just does something slightly different. Compress first and it's reacting to whatever frequency balance is already there, before anything's been reshaped. Flip the order and you're EQing something whose dynamics are already under control. Neither one is wrong, they're just different cups of coffee. What actually matters is understanding what problem you're trying to solve in the first place. Are you trying to tame a dynamic performance before shaping the tone? Or shape the tone before you even out the levels? Answer that question, and the order is simple. The fear of doing it wrong is costing you the headspace to actually listen to what's happening. And listening is the only thing that will tell you what order makes sense for the track in this moment. And that listening issue shows up even more clearly when you're trying to find a frequency to cut. I find myself saying this a lot when I'm working with clients. You don't have to find the exact frequency, because here's what happens. There's a problem in the mix. Something muddy in the low mids, something harsh in the upper ranges. And so I'll ask them to open up an EQ, and they'll start to boost with a narrow band and start sweeping, back and forth, listening for the moment it sounds obviously wrong, so they can cut it. Let me show you what's actually going on. Say we got this kick, and I'll say it sounds a bit boxy. Let's EQ it. Here's what happens. So boosting with a narrow band, really narrow, say with a Q of anything beyond 6 or 7, across any track, everything sounds strange. Everything sounds like a problem. That's not your ears failing you. That's just what a tight, narrow, high boost does to audio. It's so unnatural and jarring that nothing sounds right at any point along that scale, along that dial. Now switch to the default bandwidth, whatever your EQ drops in when you place a new node, and do the same thing. And the problem then suddenly becomes more obvious. Let's try that. It's much easier to actually hear where that boxy frequency is happening. A 300 Hz cut and a 350 Hz cut will solve the same problem equally well. The precision you're chasing is wasting time, and looking for it is stopping you from moving forward. Another point is to always EQ in context. Do this in the mix or at least the group that's causing the problem. Just find the rough area with the default bandwidth first, then narrow it to fine tune once you know where you are. Broad first, precise second. And in isolation, that boxiness. But there's one obsession that does even more damage than that high EQ sweep. And it's one you've almost certainly seen in every pro session video you've ever watched. Here's one I see often, and it's the one that does the most damage at this stage. The drums sound a bit wimpy. The vocals are getting buried. So you do what you've seen every pro mixer do in their session videos. You build a parallel compression chain. That's a separate bus, heavily compressed and blended back in underneath a dry signal to add weight and presence. Only it doesn't work. The drums still sound thin, in fact, thinner. The vocals still feel buried in places. Now the whole thing sounds somehow worse than when you started. I had a client come to me with exactly this problem. Vocals were getting lost in the mix. Parallel compression was already set up and running, but the parallel chain wasn't lifting the vocal. It was smothering it. It was squeezing the life out of a performance that had real emotion and energy in it. So we scrapped the parallel bus entirely. We put some heavier compression directly on the vocal track to get the greatest dynamics under control first. And then we used automation to ride the natural energy of the performance. And the vocal came back to life immediately. And here's why that matters. Parallel compression is a refinement tool. It enhances tracks that are already balanced and controlled, adding weight and density to something that already works. It isn't a fix for tracks that don't. If the vocal isn't sitting right, the answer is almost always in the track itself. Compression or automation, or a fader move on something that's competing with it. So get the individual tracks working first. Then if you still feel like something needs more weight or density, parallel processing will actually have something worth enhancing. Which brings me to the most expensive obsession in this list, and the one with the biggest gap between what it promises and what it actually delivers. So yeah, this is the most expensive obsession on the list, and in some ways the most understandable, because the evidence feels overwhelming. Every studio tour video shows a room full of outboard gear. Nearly every pro session has a mixing console or a rack of outboard gear somewhere. And then you watch a gear review video that makes a particular piece of analog equipment sound like the missing link between your mixers and a professional one. But that's not always the case. Andrew Sheps, one of the most in-demand mixing engineers in the world, mixes entirely in the box. As far as I know, he uses no analog summing and no outboard unless he's tracking. He just uses a DAW and a pair of ears, highly trained to make decisions with intent. I had a viewer message me recently who had done what a lot of people in this position do. They'd gone ahead and bought 4 pieces of analog equipment, frustrated because they didn't know where to start with any of it. Because the question they forgot to ask before spending the money was a simple one. Why do I actually need this? Analog gear in the wrong hands doesn't make mixers better, it makes them harder. There are noise floors, there are gain staging complications, recall issues, and if you don't understand how to gain stage your signal chain properly yet, outboard gear introduces more problems than it solves. So right now, put that energy into getting the best balance you can, creating space in your arrangement and making every decision with a clear reason behind it. That's what makes a professional mix, not the hardware it ran through on the way out. So now you know the 5 things that have been stealing your mixing headspace and, more importantly, where that energy should be going instead. But knowing what to stop doing is only half of it. The other half is knowing exactly which decisions to make first and in what order, so every minute you spend on a mix is actually moving it forward. That's what this next video is about. 5 decisions that every mixer gets wrong until they've spent years figuring them out the hard way, and the shortcuts that took me a career to learn. That's all from me. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next video.